If I just did what I just explained to you guys and corrected all my mistakes, these would be some pretty good cannolis. Oh hey, my name is Nadia and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This week I felt like making cannolis and I did. Kinda, sorta, not really at all. I thought it was gonna be really easy to make cannolis, you know, you fry them, you fill them. How hard could it be? Let me tell you, it is very challenging. I really thought I was gonna be able to whip up some super crunchy shells and a super velvety, creamy filling. When I say none of that happened, like it was a cannoli catastrophe. Let's just call it that. But that's okay because I learned a lot while making these cannolis, and that's what I'm gonna share with you guys today. So welcome to things I learned while making cannolis for the very first time in my life. On that note, let's get cooking. I followed the recipe that I found in the Cake Boss cookbook because I thought for my first time making cannolis, Buddy Belastro should be my guide. And he did not disappoint. This recipe was really easy to follow. It had a lot of tips and tricks, so honestly, I had a lot of confidence with this. I am also the kind of person who will look at a few recipes, look at a few techniques, kind of put my own thing together, and then enter the kitchen with this absurd amount of confidence that I can nail this recipe on the first try. Sometimes it goes swimmingly, other times it does not, this being one of those times. To begin my cannoli experience, I started with the dough. In a stand mixer fitted with a dough hook, I'm going to combine the flour, sugar, lard, white vinegar, and 1 egg. A good cannoli has a crunchy shell and it has like almost a bubbly texture, and that's thanks to the vinegar. Instead of vinegar, sometimes people use Marsala, which is a fortified wine from Sicily, and it's very commonly used in cooking. And fortified, I learned today, is a wine that has a distilled liquor added to it. The more you know. If you don't have Marsala or you just don't want to use it, you can very simply replace it by using a dry white wine or a white grapefruit juice, mixing it with a little bit of brandy, or like I did today, just substituting it completely for white vinegar. Make sure everything is mixed together. We're going for a dough-like consistency, so it shouldn't be wet, and if it is, you can just lightly flour your counter and knead it out until you can poke the dough and it bounces back. After that, the dough needs a little bit of rest time, so we're gonna wrap it in some saran wrap and let it rest in the fridge for 30 minutes to 3 hours. I would say things were going pretty well up until this point. That's when it went. While the dough was in the fridge, I got started on the ricotta filling. I used a regular ricotta, which I just measured out and then added to my mixture. This was my first mistake. You have to drain the ricotta. And I'm not talking just like spill out any excess liquid, I'm talking like drain the liquid from this ricotta. It has to be basically dry. Not a single drop of water can be left in this ricotta. So you can either use a cheesecloth, a strainer, a combination of both. I don't know how to make that more clear. Learn from my mistake. Take all the water out. I obviously didn't do this, which made my ricotta mixture extremely chunky, wet, just not something that you want to fill a cannoli with. I was pretty disappointed by this, so I went to the store and I bought myself another ricotta. This one had cannolis on the packaging, which I thought was just going to be a recipe for success. I mean, it was better, still not great by any means. I mixed it with some sugar and cinnamon, and then I added my mini chocolate chips, and it still didn't have that creamy texture that I was going for. It still had some of those chunks. So lesson number 1, strain your ricotta and then strain it again. After the filling catastrophe, I went out to roll my dough, which was interesting to say the least. The recipe suggested rolling the dough out to 1/8 of an inch, which if you know me, you know I'm just terrible at numbers. So I was trying to figure it out with the ruler, and whatever consistency I rolled this dough out to, it was too thick. It's actually recommended, now that I've watched a few videos, that you roll your cannoli dough out using a pasta machine. So first on setting number 1 and then on setting number 3, so you almost get like a paper thin dough. So I guess that technically is mistake number 2. Roll your dough out so it's nice and thin. After rolling the dough out, you have to cut it and then roll it onto some molds. So we have 2 different types of molds. We have these bigger ones that are 5.5 inches long and then 3/4 of an inch in diameter. And then we have these smaller ones that are 3 inches long and about 1/2 inch in diameter. For the longer ones, I used a circle cutter that was 4 inches in diameter, and then for the smaller ones, I used a circle cutter that was 3 inches in diameter. I found that those worked okay, but again, the dough was really thick, so who knows if I did anything right with these. And I also feel like I messed up at this point. I mean, like I for sure did, but what I'm not sure is I've seen some people use circle cutters and some people use oval cutters. I get the logic with both. I don't know which one works best because I didn't do anything with the oval cutter. The circle one seemed to work okay. Is one better than the other? I have no idea. I have a feeling it's not gonna make or break your cannoli, but what will make or break your cannolis is the lard that you fry it in. Lard is traditionally used when frying Sicilian cannolis, so I put 2 bricks, about 2 pounds of lard into my frying pan, and you know what? That's probably the only good thing that came out of this frying experience. When frying, there's a few things that you want to keep in mind. Number 1 being temperature is everything. If your oil or lard is too hot, the outside of the dough is going to burn before the inside gets a chance to cook, and if it's too cold, well, it's just not going to cook at all, and you're wasting your time. This recipe suggested that anywhere from 350 Fahrenheit to 375 Fahrenheit would be a good temperature to fry the cannolis, so I whipped out my candy thermometer. I thought this was really useful, but I wasn't really able to use it properly, so it became a little inconvenient, and that's because of the pot that I chose to fry my cannolis in. Which brings me to the second most important thing when frying. Your pan or pot or whatever you're choosing to fry in is like make or break. I really thought this pan was going to be deep enough for the cannolis to fry and to kind of like float around, but it definitely was not. First of all, I put my cannolis in and the oil was way too hot, so they started to burn. And this was partly because the pan was shallow, so I wasn't able to kind of prop my thermometer up on the side and like see the temperature of the oil at all times. I kind of had to hold it, and then it got hot, and then my hand hurt, and just not a good combination of anything. And then not only did my cannolis completely burn because the oil was too hot and I couldn't figure out the temperature, the pan, like I said a million times already, was too shallow, so the cannolis were touching the bottom of the pan, so it just burnt in every way, shape, and form that it possibly could. Like, I'm surprised I didn't catch something on fire. My cannolis also started to open, which was really frustrating because I used an egg wash to seal them, but for whatever reason they didn't seal properly. I have a feeling that's because I didn't roll them enough, so they didn't have enough like overlap. They were kind of tight. They ended up just puffing into these little clouds, and honestly at that point I just gave up because so much was going wrong. It was Monday. I wasn't really feeling this recipe. It is what it is sometimes. So in summary, make sure your pan is deep enough and your oil is at the right temperature. These 2 things are so important when frying anything. I should know this because I fried things before, so I don't know where the logic went today. Also, a very important note, your oil temperature is going to change depending on how many things are actually in it. So if you have 1 cannoli, it's going to stay consistent, but the more stuff that you add, the lower the temperature is going to be, which is why having the candy thermometer propped on the side is really useful, because then you can adjust the temperature of the stove. Unless you're a wizard, a candy thermometer is super helpful. The last thing I learned during my Cannoli Catastrophe is that this dessert actually has a super rich history. For starters, it was created for Carnevale, which is an Italian celebration that takes place right before the start of Lent. And its name comes from the word canna, which are the river reeds that were cut into sections and used as cannoli molds. They obviously didn't have these nice metal ones or some of the wooden ones that you can find in stores, so they used what they had available, which I think is really cool. In conclusion, baking is hard and not always as easy as it seems. Things take practice and lots of time to perfect. I totally failed this time around, but who knows, with a little bit of practice, in a year or 2, I could be making the best cannolis ever. I definitely probably will not be because I've had some really amazing cannolis, but you know, I could get up there. That was a whole lot of cliches in a row to explain this experience, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. That's all from me this week, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you've ever made cannolis and have some tips for me, please leave them down below. I would love to hear. And I will see you guys next Friday. Bye. I'm gonna try a different bye, I think, every week and see how it goes. I feel like the shirt blends into the background. And this is mushroom soup, not cannoli cream. Back in the fridge. They do look okay. To be fair though, they look like almost the exact same. From this angle, like when you look in the fridge, okay, we have cannoli, it's gonna focus on my face, hold on. We have cannoli cream that's like white with mini chocolate chips, and then we have cream of mushroom soup, which is also white. What looks like could be mini chocolate chips is actually like minced mushroom. that's not what I need right now. To begin my colon. Sometimes there's not enough space, and now there's too much space. Smaller ones, I used a cutter that was flexing like a bodybuilder. Lard is traditionally, oh, this is gonna light up now because I opened the fridge. That's annoying. Okay. The last thing I learned during my the last thing I learned during, it's definitely not as like creamy as it should be. Because that would not hold or sell in any bakery in the world. It's not a complete train wreck, but it's also not great at all. We also take a minute to acknowledge that it is 4:08 p.m. in the evening and the sun is setting. The sun actually sets at 4:25 today, so we only have a few more minutes of sunshine left. I want to say that's better. We go with it. What's that line in The Godfather? Leave the gun, take the cannoli.